Good morning, everyone, and welcome to another exciting program of Northwest Georgia Cryptics. Uh, my special guest today is Mr. Brent Lange from Michigan. Brent has had several encounters with the creature known as Sasquatch. Uh, Brent says that his his first encounter was not like most, uh, but I'll bring Brent on and let him share his story with you. Thank everyone, and again, if you when you see this content, please hit the subscribe and like button. Show YouTube that you like our content, and show us some friendship. Thank you, Brent. You still there, bud?
Yes, sir. Good morning or good
Good
afternoon.
morning, Brent. Welcome to the show, bud. What I do is I'm just going to go ahead and let you tell your story. I'll interact with you throughout the program, ask you a few questions along. But mainly, man, this is your format. This is your time to share your story with the folks. So go ahead, Brent.
Okay, Rick. Well, it all began in the UP of Michigan. I never thought that there was such a thing as Bigfoot in Michigan. I thought they were all in the Pacific, west, northwest. And we were camping and we were going to go see these waterfalls. This is the first footprint I found. Um, you use the word sandstone and everybody thinks it's really soft, but sandstone can be pretty hard. And
Right.
as I was walking around the corner, I noticed a ridge, a very steep ridge, where if you or I stepped on it, we probably would twist our ankle. Whatever it was stepped on it, turned it to powder, and I thought to myself first, some kid sitting there with a rock busting up the sandstone. But I started looking at it, and I noticed there was a heel. And I squatted down. I really got a good look at it, and you could see the heel, which was approximately 6 inches wide, and the foot was approximately, I didn't have a measuring tape, but it was about 16 inches. I got a size 13, and my foot was about 4.5 inches shorter than where the toes were on this footprint. It was such a heavy creature that it actually left imprints on the freshly fallen leaves. That would take a lot of pressure to do that. So I looked that over and I followed the footprints. So I took like I'm 6'6". I weighed 230 then. And I took a large step and I didn't see anything. So I looked up further up where I would be stepping, and 4 feet in front of me was another footprint. Well, I found a total of 5 footprints. You could see the dermal ridges. It was approximately 16 inches long. The front part was approximately, I'd say, 7 inches wide, and the heel was a good 5 to 6 inches wide.
So
That was
these footprints, basically, you knew when you saw them that they were not regular human footprints.
right. There's no way a human could have ever broke that sandstone like that. Impossible. That was my first introduction to a Bigfoot footprint, and it got me thinking, maybe there are Bigfoot up here. And then we went camping. Um, my wife had to use the restroom. We was in a rustic campground. We was the only ones in there. And as she was in the bathroom, something howled, growled at us. It started out as a oh, and it ended up in a and it was so loud, Rick. it shook my whole intestines in my chest. I don't know of any animal in Michigan that could do that. And the wife come back. She got in the back. I didn't know if I should leave the kids and go get her back. I didn't know what to do. I was dumbfounded. I didn't know what that was. So she come back. She goes, "What was that?" And I said, "I have no idea. Maybe a timber wolf. I have no idea." So I stayed up the rest of the night because I was kind of concerned about what that was. And we just packed up and left. We didn't stick around for anything, after that incident. The second set of footprints I found, which was also in the UP, this is a place called by Paradise, Michigan. It's a lake called Andrews Lake. It's 7 miles north of Paradise. It's another rustic campground. And it was daytime, and everybody was fishing. I said, I was joking. I said, I'm gonna go look for Bigfoot footprints.
Right, go ahead.
Okay. I was just joking. I said, I'm gonna look for some Bigfoot footprints, and I found a lot of sidestepping, no actual footprint, but it walked on its heel, it walked on the side of its foot. It never went to the trash cans. It always went to the picnic tables, and it stood about 5 to 6 feet away from the picnic tables on the sides of its foot. Well, I tracked this thing for over a quarter mile. My dad always said I was the best tracker of the family. When he shot a deer, he'd always call me because I look for things that aren't supposed to be there. That's how I track.
Right.
Anyways, I tracked this thing to a bunch of blueberry bushes, wild blueberry bushes, and I found one good footprint. And it's sandy soil up there, but it's compact. And there was about 2 inches of needles, pine tree needles, on top of it. This heel was approximately almost 8 inches wide, and the foot was at least 18 inches long. So this was a big boy. And I took like I said, I weighed through 230. I took my shoe off and I pushed as hard as I could. Rick, I could not even put a dent in it. This thing left a 1 inch full footprint, dermal ridges and all. And I wish I had a caster. I would have casted it because you could have casted it. Something to note, as I was looking for this before I found the footprint, wherever it left the footprint, it must have had a branch and it would scribble out its own footprint. Which,
So this thing was actually trying to erase its footprint.
yeah, yeah, and I think that's why it walked on the side of its feet a lot. I found one big toe where it must have stepped just on the toe itself, but I found two spots where it was perfect soil for a footprint, and it was scribbled out with some kind of brush or something. But anyways, back to that 18 incher. I found that. I took a picture of it. I took a picture of my size 13 next to it. I send it to a group I won't mention that I don't care about that well. And he's seen the picture. He said he could see the dermal ridges. And it took me over an hour to fill out the report. I talked to him for over 45 minutes, and they just blew me off. And that was very irritating.
Hey man, I've been doing this for over 40 years. I had my first encounter back in 1981, and back then, Brent, you when you saw something like that, you didn't. It's not like today's society. It's not as open as it was. Back then it wasn't as open as what it is now as far as Bigfoot and other cryptids are concerned. And there was for quite a few years that I didn't mention, whatsoever about seeing what I had saw, and it wasn't probably until um, Blake Duckworth, my co-host, is normally with me on the show, and I had a encounter back in 2011 in a rural cemetery down in Bartow County, Georgia, and we actually had rocks thrown at us. We were bluff charged. Had tree pushed over, tree breaks.
Wow.
Had what they call the Sierra sounds, where these things were actually communicating back and forth with one another using some type of dialect. Sound more like uh, I don't know, scribbled words than syllables that they were using, more like chatter. And it wasn't until then that I really became a Bigfoot fanatic,
Right.
as most would say. But I've done a lot of investigation, went on a lot of, had a lot of encounters over the years since then, and this creature really amazes me at what it does. But yet, what amazes me about the whole ordeal is the way these way people will actually treat you, even in today today's times with it being as open as it is about Bigfoot, you still you tell people that you had encounters, whatever, and you get, like you say, you get rejected by them, and this really blows my mind why people would do this.
Yeah, I mean, they're supposed to be representing you, and they basically mock you almost, you know.
Right,
And to get back, you just brought up something. The first footprints I found was in 2006. So I give you an idea when I first started encountering things. It was 2006. We were screamed at and found a footprint in 2006. And the next year I found another footprint up there. And then I started paying attention to what's around my house. And I found the trees bent over. I found, X's. I never thought anything of it before. But I made a report to them again, and they pretty much laughed me off. They said, Bigfoot can't live in lower Michigan where you live. And I said, well, they sure do because I've seen one and I hear them all the time. I, One time it sounds just like kids playing at 4
right.
in the morning. There's not kids playing at 4 o'clock in the morning. But do you want me to carry on?
Oh yeah, carry on, man.
Okay. Okay. After the scream, after the two footprints, I started looking around my house. We have a lot of field corn down here. Tons of field corn, and we call them sugar bushes, but what they are a bunch of maple trees, and usually they're anywhere from 50 acres to about 150 acres of woods. We do have the reserves. We do have, they call them drainage ditches for the farmers, and them are pretty deep. Them are 4 to 6 feet deep. So I think the Bigfoot like to travel in that because they can hide in that pretty good. Um, One day this was during the daylight. I just started looking, and I found like 15 ears of corn in the fence row, and I thought, wow, who's eating corn, just throwing it down. And as I was walking down the fence row, it added up. It started adding up to 50, and then it added up to 100. Then I found like up to 150 ears of corn. And what they would do is they would pick the corn and step on the stalk, and pick the corn and step on the stalk. There'd be a long line where their footprints would be hidden because they're stepping on the stalk, but they're picking the corn. And I seen something about, gosh, it was only about 20, 25 yards away. It was that female. She was eating the corn, and she turned to the side, and I could tell she had breasts, so I knew it was a female. And I caught her twice eating corn. And one other time was in the middle of the night. This time it was about 4 o'clock in the afternoon. And that's when I made my report to that place, and they poo-pooed me off, basically. And it was very active at that house. I heard them a lot. I heard a lot of whistles, not too many tree knocks, a lot of rocks clicking together. With them communicating one way, shape, or form. They would hoot like a hoot owl, but it'd be a lot deeper than a hoot owl. You could tell the difference. And that was the only visual ones that I saw at that house. So we ended up buying a new house 10 miles south of that house.
Go ahead, Brent.
Okay, we bought another house 10 miles south of that, and this had 4 acres of woods. And that's when I started really encountering them. It was basically, I called him the teenager because he would come out in broad daylight, and he was jet black. And I thought it was a deer standing lengthwise, a black deer. And I thought, I have never seen a black deer, and it has a hump on the middle of its back. Well, what it was he was staring at the house, and it was the length of his shoulders. So he was at least 4 foot wide at the shoulders. And he must have been able to see me. We looked at each other for a good 15, 20 seconds. Then he hopped away on all 4. And he didn't land like a deer does, you know, how a deer will land and kind of have all 4 feet down at one time. It was a push off, and then the hands. It was a push off and the hands. I saw him twice in the daytime. The one time he ran like that. The other time he just ran across the open field, which wasn't very far into my woods. Um, uh, there's other things happening. I had a outdoor chair, brand new outdoor chair. The next day it was all bent. The canvas was ripped. I don't know if he sat in it or put his knee in it, but the framing was made of metal, and that was bent. So he apparently, I think he tried to sit in it or put his knee on it or something. Because that was, like I said, that was a 1 day old chair. And this is a fun, kind of a funny story. I couldn't sleep one night, and I always like to be where they're at for some reason. I was sitting at the edge of my porch, and all of a sudden a walnut come flying up and hit me in the foot. And I'm like, who in the heck's throwing walnuts at me at 3:45, 4 o'clock in the morning, you know? This happened about 6, 7 times, so I knew about where it was coming from. So I picked up the walnut and I threw it back that direction, but I never heard it hit the ground. Well, he hauled off and threw it, and this time it bounced up and hit me in the shin. And I turned the lights on, and I could see him running off. And I call him the teenager. He's jet black. And he went running off into the woods. Well, he was a very vocal, loud individual where the other ones kept quiet. I don't know if he was looking for a mate. I don't know what he was doing, but he was yelling, screaming, carrying on. And I don't know, about an eighth of a mile away further back, I heard one big grunt yell, and he stopped automatically. So I think that was his dad telling him to shut up because he was just making so much noise. And then,
Right. So basically, what you encountered on that particular ordeal was probably a juvenile, what we consider a juvenile. We've Blake and I and our team members have had the same experiences as you. There's a guy back a few months ago that I interviewed on here. He was telling me that he used to go to a state park in Tennessee, and what was so funny, he said that when he first started going up there, where he had to park his car, he said it was about a quarter of a mile, half mile hike into where he camped, and he said that the first few times he was there, that he'd had these things, excuse me, he'd had these things throw rocks at him. So they'd start in around 10, 11 o'clock at night throwing rocks at him, and he said that he sat there one night and he got thinking. Well, he said that when he left, he went to Walmart the next day and he bought him a basket of tennis balls.
uh-huh.
And he took these things back in the next trip that he made. He took this basket of tennis balls with him, and he said, sure enough, same time, about 10:30, 11 o'clock at night, they started throwing rocks. So he got that bucket of tennis balls out, and he said he started throwing them into the woods. Well, he said he could actually hear these things scrambling about in the woods, and he said that he figured these things would, that whatever it was, would throw the tennis balls back at him, but they never did come back at him. Well, he said the next morning when he got up and got packed up and got back to his car, that all the tennis balls he had thrown the night before was lined up across the hood of his car.
No kidding.
Right. So, these things are very inquisitive and they will play with you.
Yeah, he was definitely playing with me. I mean, um, it was quite comical, but I would always shine for deer. That I, I don't mean to cut you off from your story there, Rick.
Oh, go ahead, man. It's your show.
Okay. Um, some people said it was stupid for me to do this. I felt comfortable around them. I knew it was a teenager. The teenager was jet black and he was approximately 7 foot tall. That's a tall teenager, but for a Sasquatch, that's probably about right. He might have been in his later teens or so like that. But anyways, he was. I would get one. I'm not kidding you, Rick. At least one tree a month shoved in my yard. The wind does not come from that direction. There's a swamp that makes the trees lean the opposite way, so it wouldn't accidentally. Maybe I could see maybe one or two trees, but I would get one a month. I had 23 trees in my yard, and these weren't little trees. These were anywhere from 8 inches across to 13, 14 inches across. And I heard him back there grunting, growling, and it was about 3 a.m. So I took a flashlight and I kept it off, and I snuck back there. I had the wind in my favor, and I could see through the silhouette of the light in the background about where he was. And so,
Go ahead, Brent.
okay. And so what I did was I hit him with a beam of flashlight and I turned it back off and I yelled. I talked to him in the English voice. I said, if you will quit pushing trees in my yard, I will quit shining while you're hunting. And he stopped. It was like he listened to me. He wasn't screaming no more. He wasn't knocking stuff over. He just slowly walked off. And so did I. And Rick, out of over 3 years now, I have not had one tree in my yard. So to me, that goes to prove they were the ones pushing them in, and they actually listened to me, which I found amazing. I don't know what language they speak, but apparently they understand what I was saying. You know. Now to get to the alpha male, I've only seen the alpha male once, and thank God I was in my car coming home. I had this Cadillac that had great lights, and as I was driving home, it was 12 o'clock at night. I could see something standing next to this a walnut tree. It was next to one of those ditches I was telling you about that the farmers have, and he was waiting to get across the road. Well, as I drove up, I slowed right down to like a crawl, and I had my beams right on him. And I even angled my car at him a little bit, and he kind of shifted his body. And when he shifted his body, I'm not saying he cloaked, but he was harder to see when he shifted his body. It was like the light absorbed into his hair.
Right. I've had the same instances happen, and it's amazing at how these creatures can camouflage themselves in any given situation.
Yeah, it amazed me. And I noticed where his head was compared to the tree, and he was approximately 6 inches from the top branch. And he was huge. And I went by him really slow. Probably took me 15 seconds to get by because I seen him way down there. And the next morning, I went back, brought my measuring tape, and he was 10'8" in height. And I think he was even squatted down a little bit to kind of try to hide behind the tree a little bit. But I think that was the teenager's dad, and that was the only time I ever saw him. At the old house, I seen the female the most, and here I seen the teenager the most. The teenager got so bold. Now this is a hard story to swallow, but it's the honest God truth. I was out smoking a cigar. I was sitting at the end of my porch, and it was pitch black out. No moon, no stars, no nothing. You couldn't even see the hand in front of your face. Well, I got done with my cigar. I went to flick my cigar. My cigar went about 4 feet and about 6 feet high. It hit something and sparks flew. And I heard a like that, like it startled him. I don't know if it hit him in the back or in the front because, like I said, it was so dark out. But that's how close them thing. I mean, he could have reached around and grabbed me if he wanted to, because he was on the other side of the porch.
Well, let me ask you something, Brett. With your interactions, all of them that you've had with the creatures, have you ever actually felt threatened at any time?
No, never. Only time I felt threatened was when I got screamed at. Well, I got screamed at twice, and I didn't care for that scream. And the first Bigfoot I saw had red eyes, and that was disturbing. But as far as them coming after me or doing bluff charging or anything, that I never felt threatened. And I never smelled anything either, Rick.
Well, that was one question I was going to ask you. Blake and I have been into quite a few areas around Georgia and Alabama, Tennessee, and the only time I've encountered the smell is, as most people described it, down at the cemetery at Bartow County. Right after we had our first sighting down there in 2011, we actually uh, investigated that area for well, God, that whole winter of 2011, and we were down there maybe 2, 3 weeks after we had our first encounter with it, and we had walked around the lake. There's like a big cove that comes in off the main body of the lake, and we'd walk around this cove and over into the woods, and got smelling this like a, I don't know, a sulfur mixed with rotten eggs, like it'd been poured on a wet dog or something smell, and it was, I mean, it very stout, very pungent. And we encountered that probably for, I don't know, 45 minutes to an hour while we were in the woods there looking around. We'd found a couple of tracks, and it was just something that was very unnerving because the whole time I was in there, I felt that I was being watched uh, by something. And that's what amazes me is you can actually go into the woods, and when you're in the woods, you're in their element. You're completely out of yours, and you're in their home. And
Right.
these things can actually stand, you know, 20 yards from you and watch you all day long, and you'll never know they're there. And this is what really amazed me about the whole deal down there. But yeah, that goes back, you know, to the smell of these creatures, and that is really, I guess, a couple of other occasions up in Tennessee we would kindly smell them a time or two, but nothing like we did down there that day.
Yeah, I've heard of people saying that it made them nauseous and want to throw up.
Right.
I've never ever smelled anything like that.
Well, believe me, bud, the longer you do this, I'm going to say you will most definitely encounter it sometime along the line.
A friend of mine has a cabin up by Rose City. I don't know if you're familiar in Michigan, but Rose City is kind of a hot spot for Bigfoot sightings. And him and his sister both saw about approximately an 8 foot Bigfoot. They went and they measured where its head was compared to the tree later on. And one other time, he was pulling the kids with his golf cart, and he said he got the worst odor he's ever smelled in his life. And he described it just like what you said, Rick. It was a pungent, rotten egg, wet dog, all combined. And he tried to report that, and they blew him off too. So, but anyways, um, they do have an odor if they. I think if they want to present it, I really think they felt comfortable around me. First, I get that feeling. I don't know why. I never threatened them. I never brought a gun out. I never had a camcorder. The worst thing I probably had to them was a flashlight, and that to them that's bad enough. And but I mean, there's been incidences. I heard this this might be getting off the topic. I don't know. People tell me it's not. I heard a deep guttural growl underneath my porch, and the only thing that can fit underneath my porch is maybe a raccoon. I heard it twice, and my wife heard it once. She come running in the house. She goes, "Honey, there is something big and huge underneath the porch." So I grabbed my flashlight and I looked, and there's not a mark, there's not a scrape, there's not a footprint, there's nothing. and somebody said something that they have ability to vocalize and you know, like a ventriloquist almost, but project their sound. I thought that was a bunch of bull until I experienced it myself, because those growls were 2-3 feet in front of me underneath the porch. And it was deep. I mean, you know, lung capacity. You can tell if something's got a lung.
Yeah. Some got huge lung capacity, such as Sasquatch. Yes, sir.
Right. So, you know, what that is, I don't know. I'll leave that up to the viewers to comment on. Uh, I have no idea. I don't. I don't understand it. That's something. I'm a very logical person. I don't think everything's a Bigfoot, you know. But when you have 23 trees pushed down in your yard, and you see one out in your woods, and you ask them nicely not to do it anymore, and all of a sudden it stops, there's something to it, you know.
Most definitely.
And ever since I've gotten after the teenager, they have moved 2 miles south of my house. And I looked on a map what that 2 miles south of my house looks like. And it's all dense swamp, woods. There's very few homes. There's a lot of deer out here. I've hit so many deer on my way home from work. It's not even funny. And they have plenty of food between the corn and the deer and varmints. You know, you can hear sounds like you know, a raccoon being ripped in half, and it's screaming, it's yelling, and it lasts for a second. Oh, I got another story. I forgot. Me and my son-in-law was looking for some land for him, and we was out in the middle of this woods, and I found about 20 chicken eggs, and the tops were bitten off, and it looked like the the eggs were drank, and they're all sitting there in one spot. I knew what it was, and I said to him, I said, "What do you think that is?" He goes, "A raccoon." I said, "A raccoon is going to bring 20 eggs in one spot?" He goes, "No, I don't think they would." I try to get people to think, you know, because a lot of people don't believe me. You know, it only makes sense. It's a Bigfoot that grabbed, and there was no chickens around, you know. I mean, they probably had to go at least an eighth of a mile or a quarter mile to get some chicken, because there was no chicken coops around there. So that was their safe spot, and that's where they drank their eggs, you know. But just stuff like that, people overlook. It's easy to overlook, and I'm not cutting on people, but you got to look for the little things to find the big things, you know.
Right.
I always say a lot of a lot of maybes equal a possibility. That's my theory towards it. But that's pretty much all my encounters.
Well, you know, as far as the research goes on my end, when I encounter something like this, myself, Blake, our team members, we try to debunk, what we've actually seen, what we've heard. We try to narrow it down to, you know, if there's any other possibility other than a Sasquatch.
Uh-huh.
And that's something that we do with every encounter that we have, or people call us, and report their encounters. I've traveled as high as 150 miles, 200 miles in this area, just to go, research an area where people had sightings, where where they're actually having physical contact with these creatures, and um, I have found that by doing this that you a lot of times you're able to rule it out to something else. But 80% of the encounters that we have in this area, we've actually ended up contributing to Sasquatch activity. Uh, I live about 30 miles from the what they call the Blue Ridge WMA here, which is a wildlife management area that covers, I think like 40,000 acres, something like that. We have the Blue Ridge, the Cutta Wilderness. So we're covered up in mountains in this area, and we're getting at least 7 or 8 reports uh, a month of people encountering these things. On the Blue Ridge over there, we have what they call the Appalachian Trail. I don't know if you've ever heard of that or not.
Yes.
But,
Yes, sir.
it actually starts out at property that my great grandfather owned back in the late 1800s, early 1900s over at Springer Mountain at LJ, and runs from there to Bridgeport, Maine. Over 2,000 miles of it, and I've actually hiked the trail from LJ up into Virginia myself years ago, and I had a couple of encounters on it that I contributed very strange encounters. One night I was at a small area where they're like shelter areas that they've got along the trail where the hikers can actually camp and take it easy for the night. And I was at one of those shelters, and I had something come in about 30 yards from where I had the fire bill at, and this thing was, as you say, he would let out a growl every now and then, and even shaking trees, small trees, and that night, then when I went to bed, this thing actually came in and raided my backpack while I was asleep. And they were like, I don't know, I had 3 or 4 chocolate bars in the backpack, and I got up the next morning and the wrappers were laying around the outside the campfire. But it was amazing to me that, normally if it's a raccoon or something like that, things would just be scattered everywhere, but this wasn't. Whatever this was that got into my backpack, it actually opened the flaps on the backpack, and those things were pretty secure. And so whatever it was, in my knowledge, it had to have had hands to have been able to do this. Mm-hmm. Well, I had camcorder, I had all kind of stuff in the backpack. None of that was bothered. So it wasn't someone in there looking for something to steal. I knew that, but all that was bothered was just the chocolate bars. So I just kind of laughed it off and thought, well, this thing actually got him a chocolate rush while he was raiding the backpack. So yeah, I've had a lot of strange encounters myself.
I've heard they have a sweet tooth.
Right, and so have I. I know we've done, I don't know if you do it in your area or not, but down here we've done a lot of what they call gifting areas, where we actually leave apples and other types of fruit. I've left carrots, I've left eggs, all kind of stuff around, and these things will actually take these items, and then I've actually had them replace stuff, like one night, for instance, over at Blue Ridge, we'd set up a little gifting area, and something had come in and took like 3 apples and a couple of carrots, and got up the next morning and went down and checked it, and we had 2, it looked like fresh trout, where they had actually left these trout in the area where they had taken the apples and stuff. So, that's strange behavior for me. But it's like, hey, look, I'm taking your item and I'm trading you mine.
That's remarkable. It's a form of respect. I personally believe if you respect them, You might not be able to find every one of them that are going to be respectful, but the ones that I've had, as long as I keep my part of the bargain, not try to video them, not try to shoot at them, you know, keep my light off while they're hunting, they have been, they have never threatened me or my family, you know. But I know a lady up in the UP of Michigan. They had to knock down a bunch of woods to put their house on, and for 15 years they were tormented by these things with large limbs thrown on a second-story house and rocks thrown at them, and uh, I mean, a face mark on the second-story bathroom window. I mean, she said it would have had to have been close to 15 feet tall. Be able to put a face mark on it. She said you could see the face mark easily. So, you know, I think as long as you respect them, 90% of the time they're going to respect you back. I know down south they're a little more aggressive than up here, but um, my encounters have not been nothing scary like other people's. And I was slowly introduced to them, so I I feel sorry for the people who are traumatized by these things, you know. And your format that you have helps people get things off their chest, helps them to talk about it where somebody's going to actually listen to you and believe you. That's why I'm doing this interview. That's why I think people just need to realize that they don't have, they shouldn't fear it to the point where they're, you know, drinking more or doing whatever because it bothers them so bad.
Right now, I interviewed a guy from Virginia a few months ago. He's actually got a YouTube page now where people can go and actually, um, share their encounter stories. But he told me that he'd had an encounter back in 1989, and it actually he and a bunch of his friends were out uh, riding around partying one night, and there's a place up there. Uh, it's a basically a wildlife management area itself where that all the teenagers from the local town would go and sit and drink and party, whatever. And he said that he and I think it was six of his friends were up there and had this one girl that had snuck out of the house to be with her boyfriend that was with them, and they encountered a white Sasquatch that night. And he said the thing actually came up across a bank and came toward their truck, and he said it scared them off so bad they jumped in the truck, and there were a couple of them in the back of the vehicle. Well, he said he was running like 35 miles an hour down this dirt road trying to get away from this thing, and this thing was actually gaining on him. And he
Wow.
said that one of his buddies took was back then he set up mobile homes for a living, and he had a one of the big jacks that they used to jack up mobile homes. And he said that his buddy grabbed that jack and threw it and hit this thing right square in the chest. Now, and this thing running 30 miles an hour, and so the jack just bounced off of it, and the thing just kept coming. He said it scared him so bad that he was driving. He said that he got up to over like 45, 50 mile an hour going down this dirt road to get away from this thing. And so they went back up there the next morning and they found the jack about 150 yards off the side of the road down in this ditch uh, from where his buddy had thrown this thing. And it had traumatized him so bad that he told me that he had become an outright alcoholic. And the girl that was with him ended up getting on dope and OD'd and died
Oh,
because of the encounter that she had. So, yeah, these things most definitely, if you have a bad encounter with one of these things, especially if it's your first encounter, you're going to end up, going to end up being very traumatized by it. And back in those days, like I said, with my sighting in '81, we had no avenues back then to turn to. And,
Right. Not like we do now. I mean, we
right.
get great people like you, Val. I mean, Old Bears Den, people that listen to you and don't mock you. They only build you up, and we need an outlet. Not so much me. It didn't bother me to that point, but I still need to talk about it because nobody in my family believes me. I'm always mocked about it. If I even bring it up, my wife just tells me to keep my mouth shut, but that doesn't help.
Well, like I say, man, I've been doing this for 40 plus years, and this is the rural South down here. You go out and tell somebody that you saw a Sasquatch or whatever, and they're uh, they're subject to send the little guys with a white coat after you. So it's unreal. And even today, even with everything we have today, as far as the shows that we have, uh, of course, like mine or any of the other broadcasts that we have on YouTube or the other channels, you know, uh, even with all this going on in today's society, uh, people still mock you. They do me every day, but it doesn't bother me. It
Right.
doesn't. It doesn't bother me in the least because I have. I'm what I like to call a knower. I'm not a believer. I'm a knower because
Yep.
I've actually saw the creature. I know they're out there. I know what's out there in the woods, and I've had encounters with them. And you know, I'm not out here to make you a believer. I'm not out here to make anyone a believer. I'm just out here to share the knowledge that I've gained over the last 40 plus years with the people and let them decide for themselves whether these creatures are real or not.
Well, I tell you, I appreciate what you do, and it's just it's amazing, especially down there. I mean, aren't they quite popular? I mean, you're more apt to see one down there than up here, wouldn't you?
Well, we have a lot of encounters reported to us down here, and yeah, 85% of the people that will actually call or send into my email, that they've encountered these things. The first thing they tell you, look, man, I don't want my name mentioned. I don't want my name, uh, divulged whatsoever. So you still got that stigma attached to it.
Right. Well, people try to tell me, oh, those footprints you found were fake. Well, I'd like to see somebody fake stepping on a stump that's, a dead tree that's laying there, stepping on a stump and leaving a 4-inch deep, 3/4 of a, it wasn't the whole foot, it was about 3/4 of the foot. It was like it was stamped into, not stomped, but stamped like a stamp machine into the wood. I could not even budge it. I didn't tell you about this one. And the next day, I was going to take the chainsaw and cut it out. And that darn thing went back there and just pulverized that wood to smithereens. I couldn't. I would have had to have a sledgehammer to do that. I'm not kidding you, Rick. I mean, it was just that heavy. And it's like I tell people, people might go out there with their little Bigfoot fake wooden moccasins on or whatever. But the thing is you can't fake weight. Weight will give it away every time. And every footprint I have found, something had to weigh at least 1,000 pounds. You know, you can't fake weight. That's all there is to it.
Right, that's exactly right. We people don't realize, we investigate a lot of these sightings. A lot of sightings are around people's homes, within walking distance of their house, back, quarter of a mile in the woods or whatever. We get a lot of rural road sightings, things of that nature. But then we've also had reports of these things where hikers and campers have been back, 6, 8 mile in the woods. This one particular place we go to at Blue Ridge, it's like, God, let's see, probably a 2 hour drive from the main road you turn off,
Wow.
back over into where we do our investigations at the old Hickory Flat Cemetery. And this is an area that, in order for someone to fake evidence, it's a 2 hour drive in there off the main highway where the area is at. Then normally it's another uh, hour's hike into the woods from where we camp back in there where we found footprints and we found tree breaks, things of that nature. And, it's just not feasible that, most people are going to get out and do something like that and hike, spend time to drive in there, hike that distance just to take a few footprints or a few tree breaks or something like that. I
And
found
hope.
tree breaks. I have found tree breaks over there that's uh, 10, something would have to been at least 10 foot tall to have reached up and broke these tree limbs. And I'm not talking little tree limbs. I'm talking tree limbs that are 4 to 6 inches in diameter, and they've snapped these things like toothpicks.
Wow.
And it's wild at the things, and that's just it. You get out and you get in the woods like that. I'm 62 years old and I still do it. And it's something that I love to do. I love to get out and look for the evidence. Um, and I've been hunting this area of Georgia, Alabama, Tennessee since I was 7 years old. I've seen every creature that there is that we have in this area to see. I even got up on what they call Big Frog Mountain in Tennessee a few years ago and run up on an elk up there. And that's something that really amazed me. But then I got to checking with a brother-in-law of mine that works for the Federal Forestry Service, and they actually back in the late '90s they actually reintroduced the elk population to that area of Tennessee. So that was something when I first saw that I was like somebody seeing Sasquatch for the first time.
Right.
That blew my mind that that we actually had elk in this area. But then to come find out, the Forestry Service had actually reintroduced them to this area. And my brother-in-law, and I go back to him, he's worked for the Forestry Service 40 plus years, just retired a couple of years ago. And I was asking him one day if, uh, asked him just straight out, I asked him, I said, Rick, I said, what, what have you actually seen, because you spent 40 something years in the woods, not only in Georgia, but all over the United States and a couple of different countries, and doing the job that you do. And, what's the weirdest thing you actually saw? And his only reply to me was, well, he said, I'll tell you this. He said, there's things out there that I don't even want to talk about. And that's all he'd ever tell me.
He could be talking about just about anything then, couldn't he?
Oh, yes, yes.
What's your suggestion? I've heard of people, they can't even leave their house without these things tormenting them, chasing them to the house, peeking around in their windows at night. Do you have any suggestions? What would you do if you had a family of Sasquatches tormenting a family all the time, what would your recommendation be?
Well, my recommendation is, as you and you pointed it out uh, uh, earlier, you have to basically show these creatures that you're basically a friend and not a foe to them.
Uh-huh.
A lot of times, I have found in these cases that people will store dog food, they'll store their trash close to their houses, whatever. If you're having encounters like this, especially where they're coming up to your home, if you have to, if you've got a garage, put your trash cans in the garage, put your dog food or whatever you've got, animal food, whatever that you're storing outside, make sure you've got it in a garage or you've got it uh, away from your property, away from your residence, because a lot of times they're like bears. They're attracted to these smells, and they'll come in and they'll raid trash cans. They'll do anything like this, and that's what I always tell people: make sure that you've got this stuff positioned in an area away from your home, because 90% of the time, an attractant like that is what draws them in.
Right. That's good advice. I had a boxer who died, and I had well over 50-pound bag of dog food. And I've got special spots that I have mowed back into the swamp, the dark areas. I do that for them so they feel more at ease. And I took that 50 pounds of dog food, I didn't eat it no more, and I dumped it in that one of those spots where, that I make for them. And I checked the first day, nothing touched it. It wasn't nothing gone. The second day I went back, Rick, and it was completely gone, and not even one dog food pebble was left. I mean, whatever it was, they finally found it and they ate it all. I don't think a couple dogs can eat 50 pounds of dog food. We don't have a dog problem around here, and but when you said something about putting your dog food up, that triggered me thinking about the dog food they ate. I mean, they, these creatures can eat a lot of food. You know, they need it for the protein, I guess. But
Well, you take something with the body mass that these creatures have. Yeah, it does. It takes a lot of food to sustain the creature. And that was something else that I wanted to ask you about. In the area you live up there, do you ever find any deer remains, anything of that nature? Whereas that may have been killed by Sasquatch.
I found a skinned cat that was skinned, which I found odd. Not so much with the deer. Um, I found several skinned animals, and I've even found they even killed something. They left it on my by my doorstep. I don't know if it's a gifting or something that they're trying to do, but it wasn't any of my animals, so I'm not really sure. But we don't. There's so many deer that get killed on the side of the road, Rick. That it's just it's easy pickings for them,
Right.
because I mean there are a lot of deer out here. There really is, and that's something the BFRO don't realize, that there is such a large food. There's just so much food for them between the corn. They got the sugar bushes. They probably go in their sugar bushes and drink right out of the bucket. I mean, they get all that sweet maple syrup, um, maple that comes from the maple tree. And they got the cornfields, they got the deer, they got we they got the rodents. There's a lot of stuff for them out here. The only
Right. Well, we had an interview with a guy a couple of weeks ago that he pointed out another good thing or another thing to us that I had never realized. He told he we were interviewing and he told me, he said, as far as the availability of food source, he said, man, you got to realize, he said, there's like a, a billion possums uh, in the woods, just in the state of Indiana where he lived, and he said that he said that's a ready food source. It's available to them. He said, Sasquatch is basically like a bear. They're a scavenger. They'll eat basically about anything. So why not? Why wouldn't they eat possums? So that's another particular food source for them.
right. And let me tell you, we don't have very many possums around here, so they must be getting the possums. Because
Well, it's a very likely event that they could be. Yes.
yeah, every once in a while you be outside and you hear something screaming its head off for its dear life for about 3 seconds, and then you don't hear it anymore. So something grabbed it, pulled it out of its hold, and snapped its neck. Just that quick. Usually, if
Right.
something's going to fight, it's going to fight for a while, but there is no fighting. It's
Well, I've interviewed a lot of people, and there's a guy that lives at Fairmount, Georgia, a little town that's probably about uh, 15, 18 miles south of where I live. And I had been down and talked to him a few months ago, and he's actually had two sightings on his property down there of Sasquatch. Uh, and he actually called me up one morning and told me, he said, I need you to come down here and look at something. So I get in the truck and drive down there, and when I get there, he takes me over into one of the back fields from where he lives at, where they got cattle running, and there's actually a dead calf that's partially eaten that's hanging on a limb about 12, 14 foot up in this big oak tree.
wow.
And he asked me, he said, he showed it, we walked over there and there it was. And he asked me, he said, now man, he said, tell me from your experience, he said, what could have done this. And uh, I walked around underneath the tree and got to looking, and I told him, I said, I said, uh, if we were out west, I might say that it was like a cougar or something of that nature. But then I got to doing a lot of research, and big cats actually do their kill on the ground. They eat the food on the ground. They're kind of like a bear. When they make a kill, they'll eat what they want. Then they'll drag this kill off into the brush, and they'll actually cover it with brush and dirt and leave it and come back later to feast on it again.
Uh-huh.
They don't drag them up in trees and leave them in trees hanging like that, suspended off the ground. And so that I told him, I said, look, I said, a couple of weeks later I called him and I said, look, I said, it's I've done a lot of research into this, and it's to the point that I do believe that it was a Sasquatch that actually made this kill. From what I can actually discover, and that's basically what I still think it is.
I agree with you. I think they do that to keep it away from other, like coyotes or something like that. Stick them up in a tree and make it more difficult for like the coyotes to get to it.
Right. Well, I have taken and I have actually taken and put peanut jars of peanut butter in gifting areas, and suspend them out about 6, 8 foot out on a limb, about 8 to 10 foot off the ground by rope, and have this thing secured where, nothing could have climbed the rope. They couldn't have climbed the tree and got out there to where the peanut butter was at. Or if they did, it would have been very, very difficult for them. And actually go back, a couple of days later, and the rope, the peanut butter, everything be gone.
Hmm.
So, that leads me to believe that whatever's doing it has to be on 2 legs. They have to be able to reach up and get that jar, yank it off the limb, and take it with them.
That's basically what that one couple I was telling you about. They were tormented for quite a few years by Bigfoot. When they built their house, they ended up making a peace offering by they got a great big jar of peanut butter, stuck it up way up high in the tree, and left it there. Well, he went back the next day, it was still sitting there. He went back the second day, the peanut butter jar was licked completely clean with the cap put back on it, stuck back in the same spot. Now, what animal is going to do that?
Okay, you tell me. I've seen raccoons, I've seen bear. A black bear, when it gets a hold of something like that, and believe me, I've done a lot of baiting just to draw bear into an area over the years, and got a lot of footage on trail cams and stuff of bear. And normally an old bear, he'll yank a jar of peanut butter down like that. He'll rip the peanut butter jar apart and lick the insides clean, and then you have the peanut butter jar laying there on the ground. It tore up. I've never found one where they've reached up, got a hold of the peanut butter jar, take the lid off of it, eat the contents from the inside, put the lid back on, and put it back where it was at. No, I have never seen that.
Yeah, I found it amazing because what they were saying, I think was, can we please have some more? And I think that's why they stuck the lid back on it and stuck it right in the same place. And to this day, I think they still put a big jar of peanut butter out there a couple times a week just to keep them off from throwing limbs on their houses and rocks at them.
Right. And another thing about gifting, I've interviewed a lot of people that tell me, "Oh man, you don't want to gift to these creatures because you'll get them used to it, and then if you happen to, if you abruptly stop the gifting, then you're going to cause them to turn violent with you." Well, I have encountered a couple of instances like that here in Georgia, where that had actually happened. But nine times out of 10, when you do a small gifting area, these creatures, they'll come in, they'll take what they want, and it might be a week down the road, it might be 2 or 3 weeks before they come back and check that area again. But I always tell everybody that that is interested in doing a gifting area. I tell them that, look, you want to get away from your home. Do not do it right at your house.
Right.
It's like with storing the dog food or whatever. Always get back in the wood line, away from your house, at least. And I tell everybody at least a quarter of a mile if you can away from your house or farther, and set up your small gifting area. That way you have them come into that area, and they'll get used to the area. They'll come to it instead of coming to your house.
That's a good point. I think a lot of people stick it too close to their home.
Right. A lot of it is that is the fundamental deal. A lot of people do. They'll run out in the backyard, and I've had people in this area where they, I don't know how you do it at your home or whatever, but they'll take like their scraps that they've got left over from their dinners or whatever, and they'll take it out, at the edge of the backyard or whatever, and rake those scraps out. Well, automatically, you're inviting whatever's in that area of woods around your home or whatever, you're inviting them to dinner, basically. They
Yeah.
come out, it's a free food, a free meal. They come out and eat it. You get them used to it. It's just like having a stray dog, hanging around your house. If you feed the thing, it's gonna continue coming back for food,
Yes, it will.
and that's the same way with these things.
Yeah, that's so true. I always I've never gifted them other than the dog food, and my pole barn door was busted open, and I think it was a teenager, and I think he was hungry. I think he was looking for food. So I took him out a big bowl of dog food. I know he was watching me, and I talked to him. I said, "You better eat this up tonight." I said, because other critters are gonna get to it. And sure enough, next day it was completely gone. And we don't have a dog problem. The neighbors have dogs, but they got electric fences all around. So we really don't have dog problems. I mean, I guess anything could have ate a big bowl of dog food, but nothing is going to eat 50 pounds of dog food, But anyways, yeah, that gifting, like you said, I think is a great idea. Do it, good half a mile away from your home or something.
Right, that's the whole key to keep them. That's the whole key. If you've got a family of Sasquatch, if you've got one that you suspect lives on your property, whatever, if you're going to do something like this, always do it away from the house. Don't do it near your house because they're a wild creature just like anything else. You get them used to coming into your house, then you are going to have problems.
Right. Now, this let's get off the subject a little bit. Do you believe in them going through portholes?
I'm sorry I didn't catch that.
Do you believe them that they go through some form of a porthole to transfer from one place to another?
So from one dimension to another is what you're saying. Well,
Yeah.
I've never encountered it, Brent. Myself, I have never encountered interdimensional travel like that with them. Uh, like I said, I saw quite a few of these creatures over the years. I've had people telling me that they've actually seen them cloak uh, and be able to transfer from one dimension to another. Myself, I've never encountered it, so really I don't know. Um, I know I was in South Georgia, and that was another thing. Mind speak. A lot of people, have encountered mind speak with these creatures. Well, I
Right.
was down in South Georgia a few years ago with some buddies of mine at a small area on a war woman WMA, and we had been there. We were there the first night, and I kept getting this feeling that we were being watched the whole time we were there. Well, the second night we were there, it was along about 8:30 that night. We were all sitting around the campfire, and all of a sudden, it was just something that come to me that told me to leave the area, and I kind of shrugged it off. I didn't know what in the world was going on. Well, it just kept nagging at me. Every few minutes I'd get this thought pop into my head that told me to leave now. Well, by 11 o'clock at night, I told them boys, I said, "Look, boys," I said, I don't know what it is. There's something telling me to leave, and I'm going to pack up and leave." So we did. We packed our gear up and we left. And they kind of laughed at me, thought I was crazy, but we left the area. And the next week or the week after next, I was talking to a friend of mine that lives down there in that area, and he was telling me that the same weekend that we were there, uh, maybe a day, 2 days later, uh, there was a guy actually uh, walking some trails in the area around where we were camped at, and found a young girl's body that had been murdered down there and dumped.
Oh,
So You know, I don't know if it was actually something, you know, speaking to me, telling me to leave because of that. I don't know.
Did they find the cause of her death? Did you?
No, as far as I know, and to this day, they do not know who actually perpetrated the crime. They don't know.
You don't think it was a Bigfoot, do you?
Oh no. This girl had been, from what I can get from the sheriff's department down there, the girl had been raped and shot in the head,
Oh, it's horrible.
and her body had been discarded down there. Actually, about best I could get out of it, about maybe 2 miles from where we were camped at was where they found the body.
And he was probably trying to tell you to get out of there because of that person or something.
Right, and I still to this day I believe that's what it was. So you know that may have been my own encounter with the mind speak. I don't know. I can't say for sure, but I just know that there was something that told me to leave the area, and you know, I'm glad that I did.
Right. Well, I was wondering if it's a form of that sixth sense that I feel God installed in all of us,
Well, you
or
know, it could have been. It could have been. You know, that's just something that I
but
don't know. I know
really,
the area. I know the area that we were in down there was highly rated for Sasquatch, and that's one of the reasons that we were down there that weekend, was to look for evidence. And I've talked to a lot of guys that fish that area. There's a big creek that runs through there, and there's a lot of trout fishing that goes on in the area. And I've talked to numerous people that have had encounters. Matter of fact, you can go on YouTube, and there's videos. I think like 2 or 3 videos. I can't remember what the name of them are now. But where this one particular guy, he and his son have had quite a few encounters down there in that
now
area with Sasquatch.
did when this thing mind spoke to you or your sixth sense, were you the only one it did it to, or did anybody else feel?
No, I was the only one out of the group that had this happen to him.
How many of you were there?
There was, let's see, Lance, what we call Turtle, 2, 3, 4. There was 6 of us.
So they probably felt you were more in touch with them than the other guys.
Well, I think that's what it was. I really do. But you know, as I say, I have no proof to back it up. So you know, I just know what happened to me. That's just like doing. That's just like having the sighting encounters. You know, I know what I saw. I'll take that to the grave with me.
Right.
You know, I'm not out here to prove anything to anybody. I'm just here to let people know that these creatures are actually out there. You know, we share our wilderness with them. When we when we enter the wilderness areas around here, you know, we're out of our element. We're in their element. We're in their home.
Right.
That would be just like Brent. That would be just like somebody walking in your front door that you didn't know. You know, you're going to go find out what's going on.
Right. It's like somebody in your living room. You're like, what are you doing here? You know.
Right.
And I'm sure that's how they look at it, because they have no boundary lines. They don't pay no property taxes. They don't worry about any of that stuff. That it's all theirs, you know.
Right. And what people don't realize, you know, people holler, well, if they're out there, they're just a dumb ape. No, these creatures are not dumb. These
No.
creatures are curious. They will come and they will check you out. You come into their home, they're going to check you out. No problem. No discussions. They're going to find out what's going on. They are curious. And the best way, you know, that Blake and I have found as far as actually have an encounter with these creatures. You know, if you go in the woods looking for them, yeah, you're going to find evidence that they've been there. But 9 times out of 10, you're not going to see one. You're not going to get any interaction with them if you're out there looking for them. If you go set up your camp, you sit around, you cook burgers, whatever, you have a good time, laugh, whatever, joking between one another. If these creatures are there, they're going to come and they're going to check you out and see what you're doing. That's how curious these creatures are.
Right. And you'll never know they're there.
Right. Not unless they want you to know it.
That's funny because one day I just decided to go back where I know they are. And there was a big butt track where something was sitting looking at the house. And about 10 feet away from them, it looked like two huge people that laid down on their side. And they had one was a spotter and the other two were sleeping. And you can tell the difference between a deer laying down and something that's 8-9 feet tall that's matted down the grass. I'm part Potawatomi Indian. I kind of lean towards my Indian heritage. I think they know that. I think they have a sense. They can sense that for some reason. Maybe that's why I'm the one they have chosen. I think they choose you. I don't think you choose them.
That's exactly my thoughts on it. My grandfather, Alf Painter, was full-blooded Cherokee Indian, and I do believe that the Indian blood in myself, I believe that is part of the reason that these creatures actually feel comfortable enough to actually make their presence known to me.
I agree totally. I think there's something to that. But yeah, I mean, there's been so many little things that I could tell you about, but it doesn't. It's nothing I can prove. I mean, I've seen them at a distance of 60 yards at night. You could see a big dark object with eye shine. I never counted that as a sighting, although I was told I should, but I don't because I only count the ones where I'm less than 30 feet away, either at night or at day, and I've got a good sighting of them. I when you're 25 feet away at night and you got your headlights right on them, you got a good sighting of them. You know, even if it's 4 o'clock in the morning, and and a lot a lot of people aren't going to pull pranks on you at 3 and 4 o'clock in the morning. You're not going to throw walnuts at you at 4 o'clock in the morning. Everybody's in bed. You know, it's just and like I always said, people make these fake footprints. You cannot fake weight. Weight gives away the fake footprints that somebody might step in mud with.
That's
You know,
exactly right. I was talking to a gentleman that we had the pleasure of interviewing a couple of weeks ago. I don't know if you've heard of him or not. He's on Facebook, Mr. Tom Cantrell. Uh, Tom, you can go to his website. It's tomcantrell.com. Uh, Tom is up in his late 70s. Tom has been a researcher since 1958. Tom's had the fortunate ability to be able to live out in Washington State, on the peninsula out there. He has had great encounters over the years. Tom is actually what I love to refer to him as a Jane Woodall of the Sasquatch world, because he's actually been able to get out and be able to interact with these things in the wilderness like Jane did with the great ape. And Tom has had a lot of real good encounters. Tom has, I think, 7 or 8 books that he's written on the subject of his encounters with these species. So, if you get a chance, or if any of the viewers get a chance, go on Tom's website and check his website out. You can order his books on there. Tom's a real great guy. I really enjoyed interviewing him, and I'm going to bring him back on the show in a couple of weeks for another interview. But it's just fascinating what the encounters that Tom's had and the knowledge that he's gained of these creatures over the years. Far vast beyond what I've been able to do here in Georgia, and that's what I rely on as far as my research is actually getting in the field, but actually picking the brain of these people that's been out there doing this a lot longer than I have.
And it sounds like they actually trusted him,
Oh, most definitely. For you to be able to see some of the things that Tom's encountered and Tom's written about, and you can tell when I interview someone, I can tell, like yourself, Brent, whether they're actually being forthcoming and truthful with me, or whether it's just a bunch of made up malarkey that they're just wanting to get a name out there. And Tom's one of those guys that by the way Tom speaks, by his actions, you can tell that this man is being very truthful with you. And like I said, from his writings, you can tell that the man has been there, he's experienced what he has, and he's lived to tell it. In Tom's interview, I was discussing with him whether he thought these creatures were a benevolent species or whether they were an aggressive species. And Tom's reply to that was, as I always was, or as he always does, was, he told me, he said, look, I'm 58 years old. He said, if you've got an aggressive Sasquatch in your area that's terrorizing you, he said, call me. I'll come and stand. He said, and I'm 78 years old. He said, I'll come and stand between you and Sasquatch. He said, that's how much faith I have in these creatures that they're not going to harm you.
Wow.
So
that's remarkable. He must have really gotten into their mind, and to understand them, to be able to do that. I was going to ask you about.
He was telling me that he had gained enough knowledge over the years that these things, people think they're like deer or bear or whatever. They go into rut or whatever every year. But Tom explained to me that these creatures, he'd actually found that they have a mating season once every 7 years. That's how they control their populations. How they don't overexplode like everybody else, or like human species does. But then he said that these creatures will actually travel from one part of the United States, plumb across the United States to take a mate. So
they'll travel to get a mate then.
Right.
So that one that I heard out back in my woods yelling and screaming and carrying on for about 15-20 minutes, and then his dad yelled at him. I thought he was looking for a mate. Do you think that was a possibility?
Well, out of younger teenage Sasquatch, or juveniles as I like to call them, that's very possible, especially the male species or the males of the species. Now, Tom was referring to a female. He said that he had tracked this thing, that it had actually came from, I think he said, Virginia, all the way out to Oregon to take its mate.
Wow. I never thought about that. That's amazing.
And I was asking Tom about the Appalachian Trail that I'd mentioned earlier. About the possibility of those things using the Appalachian Trail, and Tom's reply was, "Well, why wouldn't they?" He said, "You got a 2,000 plus mile trail that's easy walkings that these things could travel back and forth on." And another thing I'd like to point out, Sasquatch. Uh, in my research, I found that they're what I call nomadic. They travel with the food source.
Uh-huh.
If a food source is depleted in their area, they're gonna move out of that area and gonna go to another area where food source is abundant. And it's like me and you, if you got a favorite grocery store and all of a sudden that grocery store shuts down, what are you going to do? You're going to get out and you're going to go find you another grocery store to shop at.
Right.
Well, that's what I have found in my research. That's what these creatures do. If a food source is depleted in one area, they're going to move to another. Not to say that they won't come back to the original area, because that could be their homing area. It's not to say that they won't come back to that area, but I'm just saying that if the food source gets depleted in that one particular area, they're going to go somewhere else, where the food source is plentiful.
Well, that's what I was thinking. I think they migrate from here towards the winter time because for one thing, they have less cover. They have all the cornfields are down. The maple syrup's not running anymore. There's still plenty of deer, but I think they migrate. Just my opinion. I might be wrong, but I don't think they just hunker down. I think they actually travel to go, like you said, with a food source and for the cover. The Appalachian Trails, isn't that full of caves and everything too?
Oh yeah. It's abundant. They're abundant cave areas all along the trail. Plenty of food source. The only thing with the Appalachian Trail runs the full length from Springer Mountain to Bridgeport, Maine, but it's just basically mountaintop, mountain peak travel. And what I believe these things do, they travel those areas during the summer months, because that's where most of your encounters come from, the campers, hikers, whatever is on the trail, is during the summer months. Winter months, they're just like deer, bear, anything else. They come down off the mountains down into the flatlands, following the food source.
Mm-hmm. Well, that makes sense to me because I think that's because I don't hear them at all during the wintertime. It's always late fall is about the end of it, and then it starts back up at early spring. Around
Right.
here, around here, anyways.
Well, this one particular area we have down here in Bartow County, we've done a lot of research in that area, and that area, from I'm going to say mid-September until January, early February, it seems to be the busiest time down there with these creatures. And after that, they start migrating back up into the higher elevations, because you've got all kind of berries that put out. You've got all kind of fruit trees that put out in those areas, up on the mountain ridges. You've got all kind of crop aprons, such as pecans, walnuts, chestnuts, whatever. And these are food sources that these creatures, they're just like the deer and all. They feed on these food sources. Well, in the winter months, when these food sources get depleted on the mountains, Then of course they start moving down to lower ground and start where as you know the deer actually migrate down. These creatures migrate down with the deer herds or whatever for food source.
Now, where'd you say that was at, Rick?
Uh, the area that we do a lot of research is in Bartow County, Georgia.
Okay. Now, are they more aggressive down south than they probably are up here?
Well, I myself have encountered some aggressive Sasquatch behavior uh, in this area. We have a lot of reports where people do have a lot of aggression where these animals are concerned. But that was another point I was going to make. You know, as long as you're not being aggressive with them, they're not going to be aggressive with you. But
Right.
if you go into an area and you're packing heat, packing firearms, uh, these creatures know it. I mean, when you go into an area and you pull a rifle out or a handgun out or whatever, these creatures know what those things are. Uh, they know they're a weapon of destruction. They know what they are, and they're going to present themselves in that type of situation. Uh, I interviewed a guy from Florida who actually lived in Baltimore, Maryland. He was a canine police officer up there in Baltimore. Okay, he told me that he and his friend that worked on the police force there with him had encountered all kinds of wild things, from crack houses to whatever, doing their jobs. Uh, he had gotten injured on the job and had to take 6 8 week leave. And during this time, his buddy had some friends that lived up on the New York Connecticut border that had been tracking deer up there on the Appalachian Trail. They've been using trail cams and they got a shot of a lot of big deer. And they had invited his buddy to come up and go deer hunting with them. So of course, he turned around and his buddy that had gotten injured, he invited him to go with him. So, he said them being police officers, they had bought non-resident tags for both Connecticut and New York because they didn't know exactly where they were going to be at on the trail. So they went up and went in this particular area. He said they went in and they had hiked about 4 or 5 miles and they encountered some guys that worked with the Federal Forestry Service. And he said the group of guys told him, said, boys, said, y'all can do whatever y'all want to do up here. He said, they are great hunting up here and all. He said, but I'm going to tell you, at night there's a lot of strange things happen up here. And he said the guy was older, probably in his 60s like I am, and said, they just kind of laughed it off and went on. Well, he said they hiked probably another 4 or 5 miles and they set up camp at night. And them being police officers, they had taken their shotguns with them, and they had taken some rubber bullets that they actually used on the police force with them. And he said they had those in their possession. Well, he said that night, the very first night in camp, they encountered what they thought was a young juvenile Sasquatch. And he said this thing was down an embankment about 30, 40 yards from their camp. And he said that it kept making racket, and they shined their lights, and they actually saw this thing looking out from around a tree at them. Now, it had not come into camp. It had not approached them. It had been making a few calls, whoops, whatever. But his buddy got carried away and shot this thing with one of those rubber bullets. And he said, man, he said, I'm telling you what, Rick, he said, when it did, he said, all hell broke loose. He said, those things bombarded us. He said, right after he shot this thing and it screamed out, said it screamed out in agony, man, when he shot it with that rubber bullet. And he said, when it did, they run back up the bank, but they were down about halfway down that embankment. And he said, they run back up. And he said, just as soon as they topped out on the hill and got into the edge of the camp, he said they heard this big whistling noise, and he said I glanced up, and he said there was a tree about 8 foot long, about 12 to 14 inch diameter, came over our head just in a revolving motion and hit our fire pit. And he said this fire went everywhere. And he said then we were bombarded all night long with rocks being thrown and all. He said the next morning he woke up about 6 o'clock, got up and was packing his gear. He said his buddy come out there and told him, "No man, said, look, so we got a chance of killing a big buck this morning. It ain't, my GPS shows it ain't but about another mile and a half of the trail where they got those trail cams located. If we can go up there and set up and hunt, and if we don't get anything by around 2 o'clock today, we'll come back to camp." Okay, he said they went on that morning. He said when they come back to camp, about probably 200 to 300 yards coming down off the trail, he said he noticed that there were clothing scattered in this brush beside the trail. And he said, "Hey man," said, "I got to looking." He said, "And it was my clothes." He said, "My underwear, my shirts and stuff scattered all in this bush." And he said, "We got on down and come off the hill down into where the camp area was at." And he said the camp was destroyed. He said that the tent they were in, this thing had, whatever it was, had torn the tent down. He said it had urinated all over his tent and sleeping bags. He said a Coleman stove that they had was broken in half. One half of it laying beside the trail. The other half was in a brush pile, he said, out about 60, 80 yards from where they had set up camp at. He said this metal stove was literally broken in half.
Wow.
He said that parts of the tent was suspended like 10, 12 foot off the ground over a tree limb. He said junk scattered everywhere. A rifle that his buddy had left in the tent was laying, and he said the barrel was twisted, looked like a pretzel.
Wow.
Now, man, you tell me the sheer strength of a creature that it would take to twist a gun barrel, let alone break a stove like that in half.
Right.
And all of this they brought on themselves because his buddy shot that thing with a shotgun.
Not smart.
No, I mean that is what I'm saying. If you're in the woods and you approach these things, you know, man, whatever you do not make any type of threatening gestures to these creatures.
Now, what do you think about if you run into one and you're looking at them eye to eye? Do you turn your head away a little bit, not to look at them eye to eye?
Right. Do not make eye contact with these creatures. Just kindly bow your head and back out of the area. That's what I tell everybody.
Okay, you know, good advice.
Right. Do not make any sudden movements. Do not make any threatening gestures to them. And 9 times out of 10, they're going to leave you alone.
Now, if you got a rifle in your hand, just like slowly set it down and turn.
Right. Just kindly just put it down to your side. Don't make any threatening gestures. It's like another guy that I talked to from Clayton, Georgia. He and his brother had went in on the creek up there. He said weekend before he had just a small trout outfit, maybe 4-foot rod. They had fished all day long. They had no problems whatsoever. The next weekend they went back. He had carried his 9-foot fly rod with him. Went right back to the same location. His brother was down about a mile down the river from him, the creek from him. And he said that he was up there with that big fly rod, you know, whooping it around fishing. And he said all of a sudden he just got bombarded with rocks being thrown at him and these things yelling at him. And he said, he asked me, he said, "Rick, what do you think it was that caused that?" And I told him, I said, the only thing I can come up with is the fact that you had that big fly rod, and you know, maybe they actually thought this thing was a firearm that you had, and they felt threatening by
it. It must have been. I mean, it didn't bother him before, right?
Right. No. When he was in there the weekend before, he had just a small trout outfit, about a 4-foot rod that didn't bother him at all. He went back the next weekend with this big fly rod, and all hell broke loose for him.
Yeah, well, in the Bigfoot world, there's a lot of do's and don'ts, and unfortunately, a lot of people do the don'ts.
Well, like I tell everybody, these creatures, they're a wild creature.
Yeah.
The woods is their home. They live there. They know what's going on. Uh, we're intruders into their world when we're out there. And uh, these creatures are much, much, much smarter than what we as a human race want to give them credit for. Uh, you know, and they may take things that we would think, we wouldn't think anything about, but they might take it as a gesture of you meaning them harm. And there's no telling what they liable us to do.
Well, I agree with you. I consider myself a knower because of all the encounters I've had. But I give credit to a lot of people who are believers who have never seen one. I give them a lot of credit because they're open-minded enough to actually realize that, hey, there just might be something out there, you know. And I'd like to give them credit for that because they're open-minded enough. They're not mocking people. They're just interested in hearing about other people's encounters. And I don't call them stories. I call them encounters because it is an encounter. And the information you gave me was very valuable. And I appreciate it.
Well, Brent, I've really appreciated having you on the show, man. And I hope you continue your research in that area up there. Anything that you come up with that you would like to share with us, just hit me back anytime. We'll be glad to have you back on the show. We've went a little over an hour, so I'm going to get off here. But like I say, man, I've really enjoyed having you today. And like I say, if you come up with anything that you think you'd like to share with us, just hit me back up on Facebook or on my Northwest Georgia Cryptics at gmail.com. Just let me know and we'll schedule another time to come back on. Man, I really appreciate it. Thank you very much for your participation today. And ladies and gentlemen, if you're watching this today or anybody's going to watch it in the future, I hope you like the content. If you do, hit the subscribe button, hit that like button, show YouTube you like our content. Brent, I'm going to say goodbye now, buddy, and we'll talk to you later.
Well, thank you, sir, and thank you for having me on. And it only takes a few seconds for somebody to hit that like and subscribe. So you do a great job, and I just want to thank you for having me on, and I want to thank you for the knowledge that you have.
Well, you're very welcome, Brent. Anything that I can share with you, man, just hit me up, and I'll be glad to answer any questions you got.
All right, thanks. God bless, Rick. Take care and have a great day.
You too, man. Thank you.
All right, goodbye.
Ladies and gentlemen, please hit that subscribe button. Show us you like our content. Anybody that's watching now or watching in the future, this is Rick Weaver, Northwest Georgia Cryptics. Blake and I will be doing another show tonight at 10 o'clock. With Val and David from Michigan. Val runs the Michigan Bigfoot Report. So join us for that. I know we're going to have a good time in discussing our favorite subject, Sasquatch. Goodbye, everyone. Have a safe day.